Senator Barb Goodwin carried the legislation that provides immunity to underage drinkers who do call 911. She's here to talk a little bit about that legislation and a couple of other pieces as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Julie.
So, Senator, let's begin with this piece. Now, to avoid a ticket, the law states a person must have immediate health or safety concerns, and anyone calling to get help for another must remain on the scene and provide contact information to police. So what do you think constitutes immediate health or safety concerns?
It could be anything from somebody choking, over drinking and choking, and that has happened several times where somebody, chokes on their own vomit, and so if they call on that, it could be that they're suicidal. It could be that they are passed out in a semi-coma, alcoholic semi-coma, or coma, and those are all immediate things. It also could be that their safety could also include that perhaps they were threatening to walk out into the river, or threatening to drive their car, or something like that when it's obvious that they're very inebriated.
Was there kind of a culture of fear, and is there a culture of fear of calling 911 because of fear of a ticket?
Absolutely. What happens, and especially in colleges, is that students worry about the possibility of losing their ability to get a license, maybe for some practice, maybe for teaching or accountancy or something like that. If they get a ticket for underage drinking, some different kinds of licensure will, some different kinds of jobs will reject them as well, if the licensure doesn't.
Let's talk a little bit about the universities. While underage students will be protected by this law, the University of Minnesota can still sanction students under its student conduct code. Do you think this might deter some students from calling 911?
I think that it could. I'd hope the university would retract that and change that, because I think it's very important. First of all, this law came from University of Minnesota students who realized there was a big problem out there with people being left at parties alone sometimes when they were very ill, or left in a dorm room or whatever, because people were afraid to call. So if the university is still going to sanction these students if they're calling on an emergency, or if they're the person in that emergency, then it's going to create the same kind of issues that we already have. They can't arrest them for it, or they can't give them a ticket for underage drinking, but they can sanction them scholastically, and that will also deter people from calling.
And prior to this law, it was really up to a police officer or sheriff or whomever the law enforcement was to use their own judgment on whether or not to give a ticket. Why did you feel the need to carry this and to actually provide overall immunity?
Because basically it's in the statute that underage drinkers, there's sanctions for underage drinking, and there wasn't any exclusion like this for people calling. So some officers would not charge them, but a lot of others would, and in order to make it, because they felt like they were following the law the way that it was. There was no exclusion in law. So to put this exclusion in law and to allow somebody to call and get help for the other student is definitely going to be a life-saving thing, and it'll be consistent now across the state.
Now, 16 other states do have similar statutes. Were there any areas of concern that sprung up from those other states that maybe were incorporated into our law? In other words, how tight do you think Minnesota's law is?
Because of some of the changes, amendments that were made in committee, it tightened it up a lot more than what some other states have done, because it also allowed somebody to go out and flag somebody down or whatever, and it's restricted now to appease mostly the Sheriff's Association, that it would be restricted to them giving a call and being there, staying in the place until the help came. Otherwise, they could go to a neighbor or go somewhere and try to get help close by. So in that way, ours is a little more restrictive than some of the other states.
Okay, Senator, you had a couple of other pieces of legislation that took effect August 1st as well. One of those allows the police or law enforcement to take and keep the money of somebody who is trying to solicit a prostitute. What was the law prior to that?
Prior to that, they could take a vehicle or other equipment that was used in the offense, but they couldn't take the money from the person that was soliciting for prostitutes. And now what they can do under this law is they can take the money off of them. The reason, this is for a couple of reasons this is important. One is that sexually exploited youth are involved a lot of times, and people that do that to you, to young people are should lose the money, at least that they were going to spend in that case. The big reason for this, though, is, in my opinion, was to make sure that we put some money into the Safe Harbor program for sexually exploited, sexually trafficked kids or whatever, so that they have a place to go if they want to get away or trying to get away from somebody that's trying to exploit them for sex.
Okay, and finally, you also expanded a law that protects the finances of vulnerable adults. What are some of the key changes?
Well, the key change in that one is that it now, the case can be held against somebody in the county that the victim resides in. It used to be maybe the county that it happened in. But a vulnerable adult can be moved into a nursing home in a different county, or can be moved into assisted living or apartment, whatever. And so it should be able, the case should be able to follow the adult where they are, the victim where they are. And that's what they can do now. In addition to that, they can aggregate 6 months worth of, for example, if you were an elderly person and I was stealing money from you on your credit card, they didn't necessarily have the ability to aggregate all of the months you did that to me before I could find out. So to charge it with whatever crime that would be based on the size of the financial theft. So now they can. Now they can, consolidate those months that.
Okay. Okay, Senator Barb Goodwin, you obviously had a very busy 2013 legislative session, and we look forward to talking with you again in 2014. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Julian. I'm really glad you talked about the underage drinking bill, because if people don't know about that, then it doesn't really do any good to pass it. So with school coming up, as you mentioned previously, it is important for students to know that they want to save a life.